I'm not sure the Europeans are even relevant at this point. I don't think the Moscow is terribly concerned about them. I think the whole idea of the United States operating as a broker in good faith is absurd. Without us, there would have been no war at all. So, how do you explain the American role that really starts? Larry Johnson sent me a note this morning. He said he started looking at all of the exercises involving Ukraine and NATO forces starting in 2007. What's remarkable is that they just become more and more frequent and intense over time. So the anti-Russian or the hostility to Russia was sort of baked in long before Trump showed up. And I don't think he understood from the very beginning that it was really not his call to settle anything in the region. He's not a honest broker in the Russian view. Now, I think they've been very polite to him and let him spin his wheels and try to do things. But ultimately, I don't think they expected anything to come of it. The question is, why would you pay any attention to President Trump at this point? Because where has he been on these issues? He was never a forceful voice for ending the war, never a forceful voice for peace. He came to it gradually and then made outrageous claims that he could not possibly transform into reality, that he could end it all in a day. Well, that's absurd. I think that reflects the assumptions that he continues to hold about who we are in the world today. It reflects this lack of understanding that we really do live in a multipolar world, that we are by no means the sole superpower. And if anything, we're viewed as very weak and vacillating at this point, particularly on the economic side. So I'm not sure the Russians are surprised. He may be surprised. And so now the Trump team wants to cover its tracks and sort of save face and pretend that, these Ukrainians just won't work with us. Come on. It's deeper than that. It's more profound than that. So I think we are rightly now going to stop interfering, I hope. To what extent President Trump and his team have control of the CIA is very much open to debate. And Radcliffe, the man who's over there, is a neocon. So I don't know what the CIA is actually doing. And I think that's something that Trump ought to focus on and find out along with Tulsi Gabbard. Because I just don't see that we're doing a sharp turn in any particularly new direction. We're just sort of pretending that we had a role to play. And because the Ukrainians don't like us anymore or something, we're leaving. We're picking up our toys, leaving the sandbox and going somewhere else to play.
Well, as you said, the US, it does play a strange role because it has been a key participant in this war from the beginning, from the toppling of the government. And of course, as we learned from the New York Times article, the US has been very much front and center at the war planning. But at the same time, Trump and his team presents themselves as the mediators, who's simply trying to get all the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians to all come to an agreement. It is an interesting, balancing act. It's a bit confusing as well, I would add. But what is the wider strategy then? What if there is no political settlement here, where does the United States go from here? I'm just asking because if Trump decides to double down and put more pressure on Russia, then how is his policies any different from that of Biden? And to this regard, he can't really argue that this isn't his war anymore, because at the moment, as you said, this is our U.S. weapons, U.S. intelligence being used to kill Russians. So, how long can you play to be a mediator if there's no peace to be made?
I think those are legitimate questions. I think we have to come to the realization that the United States has no strategy. Now, that's not entirely a new development, let's be frank. Once the Cold War came to an end, it was more an effort to maintain our hegemony, political, military, and economic, than anything else. And we thought that the way you do that is by threatening and bullying and intervening. That hasn't worked out very well. In the meantime, we've largely ignored our own economic problems. We like to blame China for everything that's wrong at the moment economically, but the Chinese did not come over here in large groups and demand that we move our industries to China. They may have been the beneficiaries of that, but we allowed it to happen because the people in the private sector saw huge profits to themselves and could care less about the United States. So that's a separate problem entirely. People complain about the Chinese because they say, well, they've stolen IP, they've stolen this. Well, the Chinese have been doing that for the last couple of thousand years, as the Japanese and Koreans and others will tell you. And that's our fault because we admitted them to laboratories and universities and government labs and so forth. What did we expect to happen? I mean, it's just, we are the authors of our own misfortune, let's put it that way. But no one wants to admit that, least of all Donald Trump. Excuse me. And so I think right now there is no strategy other than, well, we're going to punish those Chinese, which of course is not working very well. If anybody's being punished at this point, it's us by our own actions. So what is the strategy? What are our interests? You see, it becomes very difficult to define your true strategic interests when powerful lobbies make those calls for you. And right now, the Israel lobby is in charge, and they're defining what our larger strategic interests are, not Americans. And then you have the sort of military-industrial congressional complex, which is all about funding itself and enriching themselves. They too have a huge impact on the conduct of policy. That's why I said, instead of doing what he's doing, I think he would be well served to find out whether or not he's got any control inside his own government. What's happening inside the CIA? What's happening over at the National Security Agency? What's happening on the ground in the State Department, if anything? I mean, the truth is, I think the State Department is increasingly irrelevant. It's a relic of the sort of early 20th century. It doesn't seem to have any impact at all. And I think that Rubio is almost indistinguishable from Blinken in all important ways. I don't know how many times I've spoken with delegations, people from overseas that have been seeking contact with the Trump administration and all threw up their hands in disgust and walked away from the State Department. Saw no point in talking to them at all. So that leaves Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense is obviously in complete disarray. This is all self-inflicted nonsense, but I don't think anything's going to change until we see the financial crisis develop and the economy implode, which I think is not far off now.